Yeah.
You know, because you get plenty of parking and stuff in the open area.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, you want to charge admission a couple of bucks and
Yeah.
put your band up on top of the concession stand. Everybody makes money. Everybody has fun.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
Yeah.
Indiana Rocks Night at the Drive-In Theater.
Yeah.
Shelbyville.
Shelbyville.
Shelbyville. We'll talk. Hey, everybody.
Ahoy there.
Ahoy. We are, I hope we are live.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. And we're going to be joined by Alan KAYE.
Oh, yes.
We've been trying to schedule this for a while.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Alan has a very varied past in entertainment.
Yeah.
Disc jockey, comedian, very talented Joe Cocker impersonator, and very talented singer and entertainer. And as a matter of fact, let's just start out with that, with a little bit of Alan KAYE, currently with a band called Tricycle. And we'll talk to Alan about that coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But for those that don't know who Alan is, here's a brief introduction to what's going on right now with him. Alan KAYE, Tricycle. Hopefully. I don't know if we got him muted.
Bus stop, bus goes, she stays, love grows under my umbrella. All that summer we enjoyed it, wind and rain and shine. It proves that I've been saved. You may be right, I may be crazy. Oh, but it just may be a little
Version of that.
I want to thank you for letting me be myself again. Thank you for letting me be myself again. If you want me to stay, I'll be around today to be available for you to see. But I'm about to go, and then you'll know, for me to stay here, I got to be me. Put up your dukes, let's get down to it, and hit me with your best shot. Come on and hit me with your best shot. Hit me with your best shot. Fire away. Come on with it, come. You can leave your hat on.
Yeah. All right. So an idea of what Alan KAYE and Tricycle are all about right now.
Yeah.
I had not heard of
good.
it. This is the first time that I've heard them. We haven't seen them live yet. Good. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Good harmonies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything sounded good.
Alan has always been good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, no matter what he's doing,
Yeah.
he's always
Always
made
good
sure
comedian.
that it was a excellent performance.
Yeah. Tasteful.
Yes. And you got to, I admire that.
I do too. A lot of people don't.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. A lot of people despise the audience.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, really, a lot of entertainers despise the audience. And Alan's not like that at all.
Oh, no.
So we'll be talking to him coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And they're going to be playing coming up here, I think, this week. We'll find out for sure where they're going to be playing and when they're going to be playing. And we're going to kind of go backwards with Alan. Normally we start with entertainers we have on here. We normally start at their beginning
Yeah.
and go up to present day. we're doing it backwards with Alan. We're going to be starting with where he's at now, and then moving back. And it's not surprising they sounded so good. The there we go. The people in the band.
Yeah.
Alan KAYE.
Yes, sir.
How are you, my friend?
I'm better than average, and I've got references.
Now
Now, they're old references, but they're good just the same.
That's right. That's right. Well, first of all, thanks for calling in. Thanks for giving us some time.
Oh, my pleasure, buddy. I've been watching a lot of your programs, and I enjoy them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. Normally, we ask everybody right off the bat if they've ever moved a Hammond B3 organ with a Leslie amplifier.
Not only have I done that, I've done it with 2 Leslie amplifiers, a Fender Rhodes piano, an Elka string ensemble, and a Celeste and a Minibird. And the player was the littlest guy in the band.
It always works out that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The second question, are you related to either Danny KAYE or John KAYE from John KAYE and Steppenwolf, singer-songwriter?
No, I am not. As a matter of fact, John KAYE is KAY, and Danny KAYE, KAYE, is not related to me in the least.
Not his real name, probably, now that I think about it. Yeah. But, you know.
Probably Schwartz or something.
Yeah. Rabinowitz.
All right. We showed a little introduction to Alan KAYE and Tricycle, the Dinwiddies, and Dane Dye. Talk a little bit about your fellow musicians in that band at the moment.
Well, it's really a good fit. John Dinwiddie is so versatile on guitar, and he plays during the show. He'll play his classical guitar, he'll play his electric guitar, he'll play his 12-string. He's so versatile: jazz, pop, rock, and over the years he's done it all. I mean, he was in bands, indie bands back in the day, like Empire, and so he's been around a while. And his wife Cindy had sang with John when John was in a band. I think the band's name was Jubal, and they traveled up and down the East Coast, and Cindy used to perform with him. But later on, she dropped out. They got married. They had 3 kids. She hadn't sang forever, and I was always kind of on her, saying, you know, Cindy, you ought to sing some with us, you know. And she'd go, oh, no, it's been years and years since I've done that. But she came out of her shell, and she provides percussion and some really stellar vocals, both lead and background. Dane Dye on bass. Dane has been around. Dane has played party bands, and he's played club bands, and he's played jazz and pop and rock. And he reads and writes music. He and I are both big Chicago fans back in the early days of Chicago.
Oh, the early days of Chicago. They rocked.
Oh, yeah, they were rocking.
You know, before
Dane not only plays electric bass, he plays electric upright bass on some songs, and that gives it a really nice texture.
Wow, right? That's cool. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Before we forget, where are you playing upcoming? Because you're going to be, are you playing July 4th this weekend?
Well, actually, we're playing the 3rd on Thursday at the White River Yacht Club, and it's open to the public. So we're going to play from about 6 to 9 or 6 to 9:30 or whatever they have us play. And then, of course, a little before 10, they'll have the fireworks. And I was there last year, and the fireworks were spectacular. I expect the same this year. Okay,
so July 3rd, not July 4th, for those of you wanting to start the celebration out early. 6 p.m. July the 3rd at the White River
Yacht Club.
White River Yacht Club. Is that 79th? Where's that at?
Well, actually, they say it's on 74th, but I turn off Keystone onto 75th, and 75th winds around back in there. If you've never been to the White River Yacht Club, it's so great. The weather's going to be terrific, and you're right on the river. And so there's usually a little breeze going on down there, and the people are real friendly, and I'm sure it'll be a good time.
Awesome. Awesome.
Then on the 11th, we'll be at George's Neighborhood Grill, 71st and Binford, and that's always a good time. It's a smaller venue, but I'm telling you, people like to sing along, and you have them get up and dance, and it's a good time too. So that's the 11th, and we start at 7 p.m. on the 11th at George's.
Nice. Yeah.
George's is nice.
Yeah.
That would be a good place to come out.
That'd be a good place to come and check you guys out on the 11th.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't.
I
got to check my schedule. I don't know what I've got on the 11th.
Oh, I know how you showbiz guys are. You're busy all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Let's go. Let's get to one of my absolute favorite things to talk about. The Joe Cocker tribute.
That's a good one. All right, I'll tell you how that came about. I had a friend who's since passed, Larry Smith, who owned the Talent and Booking Guide for a while and did Performance Magazine for a while, living down in Nashville. And I called him up one day and I said, "Look, man, I'm looking for a gig." And he goes, "Oh, you want to get back into stand-up comedy?" And I said, No, I really don't. But I'm looking for some gigs. I want to know if you can help me out. And so he said, "Well, if I hear of anything, I'll let you know." And we kind of talked, and he hung up. And he called back in a few minutes, and he goes, "Listen, somebody shot pictures and video of you dressed up as Ozzy Osbourne at a Halloween party outside of Michigan town a year back." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, why aren't you in the tribute business?" And I said, "Larry, I've been in radio. I've done all kinds of television advertising. I've done stand-up. I've sang in bands. I don't know a damn thing about the tribute business." And he said, "Well, listen, your impression of him is dead on." He said, "Listen, if I got you an audition, would you go do it?" And I said, "Yeah." So he called me back in about a week and he said, "Have you ever heard of Legends in Concert?" And have you guys heard of Legends in Concert?
I have not.
Well, at that time they owned venues. They had a show in Las Vegas. They had a show in Atlantic City and Myrtle Beach. And they were getting ready to open a brand new theater at outside the Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida. And he said, "I want to send you there, and I want you to audition for him as Joe Cocker and Ozzy Osbourne." So I went out there. I was supposed to audition at like 4 p.m. I got a phone call in my hotel room in Vegas at 9 a.m. saying the president has to go out of town, and he was wondering if you could do the audition in about 2 hours. And I said, "Yeah, sure." And they said, "Okay, see you there." Click. And I looked at and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. So I get a cab. I go to their place. They send me down to the dressing room. I had a really, it was just a Halloween costume of Ozzy. The wig wasn't real looking or anything, and some junky little jewelry things and a black coat. And so they wanted me to do Joe Cocker first. So I went in and I did Joe Cocker. And so when I was ready to do it, they had a guy in the back. This room is like 18 feet long by 20 feet wide. And down at the back of the room, there's a guy with a video camera and a sound control, and 6 people with their arms crossed in metal folding chairs looking at me. And the whole ceiling are those crystal panels with fluorescent lights under them, so it's lit up like an operating room. And it's, kind of sterile. So I tell them, hit the music, and I do the Joe Cocker thing. And they just they're kind of talking back and forth while I'm doing it, and I get done and they applaud and they said, "Okay, I think you're going to do Ozzy for us." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How long is it going to take?" I said, 20 minutes. I go across to the dressing room. And I decided when I went back, I was not going to enter and go through that. I was walking through the door as Ozzy. So I just went twice on the door, pushed open the door, and went, hey, wait, darling, you'll have to quiet down. We're trying to do an audition here. In other words, shut the up. And they all went crazy. And then I just went around and talked to him as Ozzy for about 5 minutes. And I said, darlings, I'd love to stay and talk. As you know, I am the Prince of Darkness and I have things to do. Piss off.
Bravo.
And I walked out. And so the assistant director comes over and he knocks on my dressing room door and he goes, you got the job as Ozzy. When you get back in your street clothes, come down to the main office.
Wow.
Wow.
And I was hired. So I went out and did the Ozzy Osbourne for Legends in Concert. It was only supposed to be a couple weeks. It ended up being, several months. I came back to Indiana and the Osbourne reality show had tanked, and so had Sharon's talk show. So there was no calls for Ozzy. So I was talking to my buddy out in San Francisco, who I met back in 2005. And he said, you surprised me when I found out you could do Joe Cocker. You ought to do that. And so I did it with a fake beard and a fake wig and a tie-dye shirt and bell-bottom jeans. And he said, you know what? You sound like him. You look like him. You talk like him. But that costume, you just look like a guy in a Halloween costume. He said, grow your own stubble out, get your hair buzzed, and come down and do the show with us. And I said, oh, no. And I guess the beard and the wig were kind of like a security blanket,
Yeah.
And I fought him on it, but I went ahead and did it his way. He filmed it, and the rest was history. I was doing Joe Cocker, but there wasn't enough Cocker gigs, so we did a band in between. And we'd do work on that band. We'd play that band and play all the time, and we'd rotate Cocker songs in and out of it so that we'd be ready. And even though I was Joe Cocker's opening act several times back in the 80s, he never got to see me do Joe Cocker. And I'd always wished that he had, because I would have loved to have his approval. He was really a swell guy. He was a sweetheart of a guy. He was a gentleman. He wore my T-shirts and I wore his, and it was just, it was magic. And then before the Super Bowl, and I think this was 2014 when I got the call, and I did it in 16 or vice versa. Maybe it was 15. And the Super Bowl was in San Clarita, about 45 minutes from San Francisco. And I was on my phone one morning and I got a call, and he said, the voice said, is this Alan Kay? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you probably don't know who I am. My name's Jeff Levine. And I said, wait a minute. Jeff Levine, the keyboard player that used to play for Joe Cocker? And there was like this pregnant pause and then kind of a chuckle. And he goes, you know who I am? And I go, absolutely I do. And he said, well, listen, we're doing a memorial to Joe because Joe had passed away in 2014. We're doing this memorial the night before the Super Bowl in 15. In San Francisco, and we want you to come and sing with all the different members of Joe Cocker's band.
Wow. That's
awesome.
awesome.
The hair on my arm stood straight up, and I said, yes, I'll do it. So I flew out there and got to do a show with them. So that's the story of the Cocker thing.
Wow.
That's great.
That's
the tribute business. They say if whoever you're tributing, okay,
mm-hmm.
whatever they would draw in your town, you'll be lucky if you get 8% of that. Well, the sad thing about Joe was he toured to sell out stadiums in Europe right up until he died. But in the States, he played small places and not very many cities.
Not even in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right. It's crazy that he was such a big star. But, when they would go around and try to sell the Cocker Tribute Act, these agents, they go, oh, I don't know who Cocker is. And they go, with a little help from my friends.
Wow.
She came in through the bathroom window. The letter, feeling all right. You are so beautiful to me. Oh, that's who it is.
Yeah. That guy.
So in the tribute world, Elvis is still king, like it or not. There are more Elvises, and I grant you, there's some crummy ones, but there's some ones out there that are fantastic that are making big bucks. There, Elvis, Rod Stewart, Springsteen, Tina Turner, the Beatles, the Stones, Janis Joplin. Those are Billy Joel. Those are the acts people think of when they want to hire a tribute, not necessarily Joe Cocker, and it's sad but true.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm focusing on Tricycle right now.
Yeah.
And justifiably so. I mean, great musicians you're playing with, and you still got the voice and still
you guys sounded great.
Great charisma on stage. And we were talking before you came on about how sadly there are artists that despise the audience. And am I wrong?
No, you're not.
And you are not one of them, and that's what we were saying. If you happen to be watching this and you go see him, go up and say, hey, we heard you on Indiana Rocks and we came out to see you. And
absolutely, that would please me.
And the people, and I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed in meeting Alan. He's not only an incredible entertainer, he's a good dude.
Great guy.
Well, thanks guys. My whole thing was I grew up in Kokomo, Indiana, and I used to lay in my backyard on my back and looking up at the sky, and I would actually see, jets that were obviously trajectorying from Indianapolis Airport, Weircook back then. And I used to think as a little kid, man, I wish someday I could be on an airplane and fly like that all the time. And then I used to watch comics when I was a kid on the Ed Sullivan Show with my grandparents. And I always thought the comics were great. And then one night I saw an impressionist, and I can't remember if it was Frank Gorshin or who it was back then, but they were phenomenal. And I thought, well, this is not only funny like a comedian, this is great, man. This is like magic, right? Changing the voice and stuff. So my Aunt Moyne lived in Indianapolis, and she took me to see Victor Borga at the Indiana State Fairgrounds Coliseum. And during the show, I turned to her and I said, Aunt Moyne, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And she laughed and she said, you want to be a piano player? And I said, no, I want to make people laugh. And she said, well, if that's what you want to do it. Now,
great advice.
That had to have been the 60s, okay? Now, flash forward to 1982. It's May, and I've got some shows coming up, and I'm living in Dallas. I got some shows booked at some comedy clubs, and I got some one-nighters opening for like Phoebe Snow and a couple of different people. And I get this call from Louis Messina at Pace Concerts, and I had met Louis through the Agora ballrooms in Dallas. I got to tell you, I'm a little braggadocious, but I love this. I opened more shows at the Dallas Agora ballroom than any other act.
Wow.
Alan,
doing comedy impressions.
Alan, is this legend or is this fact? I heard that you not only were in such demand as an opening act, you actually opened 2 concerts in the same city in the same night. Is that legend?
Yeah, well, no, that's a fact, brother. That's a fact. It was Eddie Gaddis was the manager of the Dallas Agora Ballroom, and he had booked me to open for Jean-Luc Ponty, which I was excited about because I know Jean-Luc Ponty's work when he played with Frank Zappa. And I got a call from kind of their competition, the Agora Ballroom's competition a little bit, down Northwest Highway, probably 5-6 miles from the Agora was Cardi's. And the guy from Cardi's called me up and he said, listen, man, I'm in a pinch. And he said, I need an act to open for Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe. They're called Rock Pile. And he said, the place is going to be packed and I got to have a good act. And I was given your name and number. And I said, oh, well, great. When is that? And he gave me the date. And I looked at the calendar and I said, that's the same night I'm doing Jean-Luc Ponty at the Agora. And he said, what time are you going on at the Agora? And I said, 8 o'clock. And he said, okay, well, get on down here right after your show and I'll put you on right before them at 10 o'clock. So I opened for 2 acts in Dallas, Texas on the same night.
That's great.
That's awesome. That's just...
Now I want to share this Chicago thing with you because it came out of nowhere also. The guy that manage bass concerts, got a lot of acts to come to the Agoras for the Agora ballroom managers. So he knew me, and he called me up and he said, "How do you feel about the group Chicago?" Now this was 1982, probably April. And I said, "Oh man, I grew up listening to him when I was a kid. You know, growing up, I'd listen to WLS in Chicago and WCFL in Chicago AM, and I'd hear Chicago songs. I had all the Chicago albums. Yeah, man, sure, yeah, I like them. Why?" And he said, "Well, they're making a comeback tour. They haven't done anything for several years, and it's called Chicago's Back Tour, and it's going to start in May." And he said, "I want you to do 2 shows in New Orleans at the Sanger Theater, then fly to Houston, do 2 shows at the theater in Houston, and then I want you to fly back to Dallas, where you live, and do 2 shows at Fair Park. How's that sound?" And so I was ecstatic, and we worked out the details and the catering and the airfare and the pay, and I went to do it. Now, I did the 2 shows in New Orleans. They were all nice to me. The crowds were great. I did a great job. Houston, same way. A lot of people had seen me at the smaller venues in Houston, saw me here in this big arena opening for Chicago. They were great. We get back to Dallas. I was married at the time. So my wife and my daughter, after the first show, left with some of my friends that had came. And I did the second show. And when I finished the second show, I changed my clothes and gathered my props, and I walked by the production office backstage, and I said to the road manager, I said, "Listen, I thoroughly enjoyed these 6 shows, and my mind has been blown, and these guys are so good, and I'm working with heroes, and it's just wonderful, and if you ever need an opening act again, you call me and let me know when and where to be." And he said, "You got 2 hours, 10 minutes to get right back here." And I said, "What?" And he said, "That is if you want to do the rest of the tour." And Bobby Lamb and Peter Cetera stuck their head around the corner and said, "Come on, kid, you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, here we go."
Wow.
And I did 82, 83, 84, and 85 with Chicago as their opening.
Man.
Gee whiz.
Got to play Market Square Arena, sold out in the round. What a thrill is that?
Oh,
In your home
yeah,
state.
yeah, your home state.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that. The first night that you transitioned from ballroom to arena, what was that first night like?
Well, you know, I'd experienced some of that when I toured with Al Jarreau in 1981. I toured some dates with Al Jarreau, and he had a stellar band, and they did some pretty good sized venues. But that was just a short. I was with them maybe a month, and here was a whole different thing. And the first concerts we went out to in '82, Chicago 16, the album, hadn't really gotten out to all the radio stations and stores yet when we started touring in May. So when we first started out, we were doing like 3,500 seaters and 5,000 seaters, or we do a 2,500 seater and we do 2 shows, you know, and it was fun and it was exhilarating. But what was wild was when Chicago 16 started making with the hits, Stay the Night, and all the radio stations coast to coast. Now we were playing 10,000 seaters and playing 12,000 seaters, and then boom, Chicago 17 came out. Chicago 16 had 2 hit singles. Chicago 17 had 4. So the crowd was roarous. I mean, I got to play Universal Amphitheater with them 3 nights in a row, sold out, and backstage were people like the guy that played Mannix and Roddy McDowell, and all these people were friends of theirs. You know, half of Fleetwood Mac was back there, and it was just insane. I got to play Radio City Music Hall. My gosh. And you know, when you walk across the boards of that stage in the afternoon for a sound check, you think, wow, think of all the incredible, iconic people who stood right here.
Yeah. Wow.
A couple of other acts that you opened for, the legendary B.B. King.
Yeah, and BB was so nice. I got to open for him in a club in Dallas called Nick's Uptown, and it sat about, I don't know, maybe 300 people, and it was just the Agora Ballroom was having all the upcoming acts like Quarter Flash and the Cars and Eddie Money and Talking Heads, you know, and Nick's had, I opened acts at Nick's. I opened for B.B. King. I opened for Phoebe Snow. I opened for Ramsey Lewis, Freddie Hubbard, you know, those kind of the more esoteric acts. Ray Charles, I got to open for at Nick's.
Nice.
You know, and
Stanley
it was just,
Clark was Stanley. I know you opened for Stanley Clark, one of my heroes.
It was Stanley Clark. It was the Clark Duke Project. Stanley Clark and George Duke. They had a hit single called "Sweet Baby" at the time.
Whoa!
Wow, man.
And I feel so lucky. I feel, guys, this is something I want to share with you, Barry and Mel. When I look at the list of people I've opened for, it's fun to look back, and it's wonderful. And sadly enough, though, so many of them have passed. But the other side of that coin is, I can say I opened for Count Basie.
Count Basie. Wow.
You know, I opened for Ray Charles. I opened for Joe Cocker. You know, I opened for John Prine and Eddie Money and Gordon Lightfoot. You know,
Todd
Leon
Rundgren
Redbone and Leon
Redbone.
Russell.
Yeah.
And Leon Russell, Todd Rundgren and Utopia.
Yeah, Todd's still around and still kicking it. And the last time I saw Todd live was in Indianapolis at the Vogue, and I think it was about 1996. And Rick Bennick and I went to see Todd. And as soon as we got up right by this thing, he had a stage set up in the middle of the Vogue called the Todd Pod. And as soon as we got right up against the stage, we looked over and there was Michael Reed. We had a great time. And Todd's always entertaining, man. I always like a Todd Rundgren show.
I've seen him with the Tubes.
Todd Rundgren?
Yeah, in Bloomington.
Feedway Bill and the Tubes?
Yeah.
Oh, what another dynamic group.
Oh, yeah. I love those guys.
Okay. You kind of told us the comedy kind of started with Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
How did the, you know, we don't want to take up a bunch of your time. Plus we don't want to go forever and ever, you know, because people's attention spans are kind of short these days.
Okay.
How'd you get into radio? How did the radio side start? What were you doing, comedy and got hired into radio, or were you disc jockeying and started doing comedy? And also, were you doing impressions when you were doing the comedy and opening for these acts? Did the impressions kind of evolve from the comedy?
Okay, it really kind of started out. The radio was there was a station in Kokomo called WKMO, and it was on the 6th floor of the Armstrong Landing building downtown. And I had went downtown for something, and I wanted to go look out at the windows at the lights of the city. And I walked up there, and you could walk down this hallway, and there was this big picture window, and you could look through it, and there was the disc jockey in there doing it. And I stood there and watched him, and he came out and introduced himself, took me in, showed me how things work. He said, "You want to here? I got some contest winners I want you to read on the radio." And I'll never forget it. My voice was kind of shaking when I talked. I was nervous, you know. I was a kid, and my first job in radio was at WKMO when it was out on State Road 26, and it moved. And then I went to WIOU, which was the sister station on the AM. Then I went from there to Denellen, Florida, and I was on WMOP. These all sound fictitious.
The mob.
Then after that, I was living in Dallas, and I started doing impressions and characters for their morning show. And so I was doing that. And then I came to Dayton, Ohio, and I was doing mornings with a guy that used to work at WNAP, Dave Gross. We had a morning show, and I worked there for about 8 years.
The Zoo.
But, And I always had done voices. As soon as I started seeing impressionists, I started doing voices to my mom and my uncle, anybody who'd listen. I'd do impressions. And when I first started out, there was really no place to get into comedy in Indiana. You know, the comedy clubs were L.A. and New York and Chicago, right? So I used to work in Kokomo, and I would go to where the bands was playing, and I knew the bands. And when they go on break, they do 45-minute sets. They do 3 15-minute breaks, and I do 2 of them doing comedy. And you know, they spiff me $50 or let me eat and drink, you know, that kind of stuff. So over the years, I started doing more and more of these clubs, and this guy came up to me and he said, "I got a guy who wants to meet you." And so we go to this guy's club, and it's called the Harem House at Lafayette Square. And he hires me. He says, "Get up and do 15 minutes, Al." And I didn't even know if I knew 15 minutes. You know, I was new. And I got up and I kicked ass. So I did the burlesque circuit for a few years. And a guy came up to me and he said, "Look, you're too good to be wasting your time in these strip bars. You know, you should get out." So I came back to Indiana, and my good friend, I was a friend of, still am, Asher Ben Ruby, the Mighty Atom Smasher from Pure Funk days.
Yes.
And he took me up to a club owner named Bud Spilker, and he had a club called the Red Fox in Indianapolis. And Asher got me my first gig for money in Indianapolis.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and we're buds. I talk to him, once every 2 months or something still.
We did last week, we did an episode on radio, and we were trying to sync things up where we could get Smash on here. He wasn't able to come on last Monday. He's going to come on later. Carl Rock and Roll Russo is also supposed to come on and talk some radio with us. Indie radio back in the day.
Well, like I say, I started the impressions with cartoons, and then I worked. Would you believe I also did a Don Adams, a Get Smart? Would you believe that? And of course, I did Paul McCartney from the Beatles, as well as John. Don't forget John. I also did, because Cheech and Chong, they were real popular, man. Yeah, man, they were like all over the radio, man. And then, of course, I worked into other things. I worked into good old Jack Nicholson and Mr. Haney from Green Acres. Hey, I could even do Pee Wee
Herman. Do you do any of this with Tricycle? We'll kind of take
absolutely.
Things back.
Absolutely.
We'll take things full circle back to the beginning. So you do some comedy, some impressions, as well as some killer music, because we've already, if you're just joining us live, go back to the beginning. We played about 3 minutes worth of a sample of various songs that you will hear when you go see Alan Kay and Tricycle. Highly recommend you do that. Absolutely. If you can't get out this Thursday, July 3rd, starting at 6 o'clock at the White Yacht Club, White River Yacht Club, 74th Street.
So that's open to the public.
Open to the public. Go out and see them, and I'm sure they've got all kinds of food and drinks and stuff going on out there, and fireworks sometime around.
Yes, fireworks afterwards. You're going to get to hear some singing impressions. A couple of them I'm going to do for the first time. I do singing impressions all through the act, but there's a couple that I'm going to be doing
sweet
the 3rd, and also on July 11th at 7 p.m. at George's Neighborhood Grill, 71st and Binford. I'll be doing some new singing impressions too. So come by and hear the band. You'll have a good time.
Excellent. Well, I know.
Thanks, hey guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
No, thank you for taking the time to do this,
Absolutely.
Alan. We all three have something in common. We all three are named Alan. All three of us are Allens.
That's the only way to spell it.
Yeah. So hopefully we can hook back up and maybe get where we got you on camera or live with us somewhere or something in the future. I know
It'd be a blast.
I know we forgot that. I know we've
Oh,
soon
yeah,
as
there's a lot of
as soon
stuff
as we wrap up, we go, man, we should ask this. We should. So I know we'll have to have a follow up with you at some point. If
Well,
possible.
what I think you might ought to do is you might ought to plan on joining me at the Howard County Vietnam Veterans annual all veterans reunion and see. We're going to have Woombley's Orchestra. We're going to have Hippies and Cowboys. We're going to have great bands. We'll talk in let's talk about the 1st September and talk about you guys coming up to hang out with us at the reunion.
We'll come up there and stream it live.
You'll have a wonderful time.
Awesome. Let's talk about that. We'll set it up.
All right, man.
Look forward to it.
I'll bid you and Mel good night. You guys are the best for letting me blab and blab and blab on.
No,
But,
man,
Hey,
this
that
was
was great.
awesome.
you know, I've been really lucky. But on the other side of that, when opportunity knocked, I was ready. So, you know, that's what I say to these young entertainers, man. Just be ready because it could
Yeah.
happen to you any day.
Awesome. We appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, fellas.
Hey,
The legendary Alan Kay. How sweet, man.
Yeah.
How sweet was
What a
that?
guy.
And he just goes into impression after impression after
Yeah.
impression. Just, you know, you do. I kept pointing to Mel when he was
Yeah.
talking because Mel does cartoon voices. Can you do a cartoon voice?
Well, I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost lost my bottom plate. I used to be able to do it when I had real fangs.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Makes a difference. So again, Alan Kay and Tricycle going to be this Thursday, July 3rd at the White River Yacht Club, northeast side of Indianapolis, and then the 11th at George's, also in Indy. And
71st and Benford.
yeah, and look forward to us being. We'll go up to Kokomo in September and stream that. The Wombleys,
Oh yeah, you gotta check them guys.
yeah. If you have not seen the Wombleys Rock Orchestra or just the Wombleys, just
Yeah,
their
they've
rock.
got a bunch of different versions of the Womble.
Right. There's the Wombleys, which is the 4-piece.
Yeah,
The Wombleys Rock Orchestra, which
10-piece.
man, they're absolutely killer strings and horns and
Yeah,
the variety of songs. And then there's Phil Purley and the Enablers.
yeah.
So three basic different versions of them, and check them out when you see them as well. Check out Project 19. Follow them on Facebook and find out when they're playing. They do a lot of private, really high-paying gigs. They're
In
fairly
the
snooty,
summertime, for
you know.
sure.
So, but you'll be somewhere.
Yeah, we'll be
Public
back in
soon.
the bars.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
yep, just look us up. We're always on there.
Of course, hit the like, hit the subscribe, follow us, and if you'd like to help support the channel financially, throw a couple of bucks at Cash App, $AMERICANDUFUS, American Doofus. Email me, americandoofus@gmail.com. Follow Mel on Facebook. The best way to follow him. Follow Alan Kay on Facebook. Now, in order for it not to be like scammy, mention Indiana Rocks when you follow Mel. Ask for a friend request or something. Mention Indiana Rocks. The same thing with Alan. Mention Indiana Rocks. And you follow Alan Kay, KAYE, ALANKAYE. And you also follow Alan Kay and Tricycle, because they've got a Facebook page as well.
Yep.
And Project 19 have a Facebook page?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Project 19 written in numerically. And I thank you all. We greatly appreciate you watching. And if you got some ideas for the shows, we're getting fairly booked here, but if you happen to have a story you think worthy of telling, get a hold of us, and we'll decide whether you're right or not. Not going to guarantee you're going to get on here, but if you got a story worth telling and we think it's worth telling, you just might end up in an episode.
Yeah. You never
Thank
know.
you for coming on here. We greatly appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next time. We haven't done this the entire episode.
Yeah.
This has been
Indiana Rocks.
hit the like, hit the subscribe. We love y'all. It's a dark world.
Be a light.
See you next time.